Tony brought through my father this evening. My father died 10 years ago, and the reading I got tonight from Tony was so accurate, I'm completely gobsmacked.
He's tiny when he passes over. Do you see he has blue eyes, darling, also?
Striking blue eyes. He described my father as a very small man who'd lost quite a lot of weight, who had piercing blue eyes. That was my father. The things that really made it real for me were the fact that he described his soaking himself in Old Spice aftershave.
This smell is a common smell, but it's a smell of Old Spice that it just pours all over me, you see, and I don't like it. But anyway, he loves Old Spice, you see this?
Yes, it's the only thing he wore. He described him rolling his own cigarettes, and exactly that he'd put one behind his ear.
He's got one in his little lip there, and I feel that I might tuck one for later, you see this? Behind my ear, and one on there, one in here. I've got them all done.
Prior to my father's death, he'd had insomnia for some months. He used to sit in the chair for quite a while.
Your father had suffered with a sense of insomnia, or had real trouble sleeping, especially in the last year or so of his life. It's something that you had to deal with, or to dress, or to help him with. You see that?
Exactly right. He also described that I dressed a dressing on a sore that he had, that only I knew about. There was no other way.
And I know he's a smashing man, but I feel that he might be a bit awkward sometimes. Do you see that?
We could clash. My father and myself are very much alike. We loved each other dearly, but we would clash at times. But neither of us ever held a grudge. It would always be within a couple of hours we'd have our arms around each other saying we were sorry.
Do you remember if he was one of 3 brothers then, your father, or if he has 2 brothers in the spirit world, 2 other boys that belong to him as brothers?
There was 4 boys, 3 who are deceased. When Tony said that, I could really relate to the fact that he was probably with his brother Ronnie and his brother William.
It's ever so strange because there was a picture or a statue of an angel by his bed. Do you see this?
He told me there was an angel by his bed. My father died in the early hours of the morning. That evening I stayed with my father. Late that night, my father told me that there was an angel standing beside his bed. I've waited a long time to hear from my father. I've come to see many mediums. I came this evening thinking I was going to hear from a friend of mine. I'd given up that I'd hear from my dad, but I was absolutely amazed that I did, and I was amazed that it was so accurate. It was wonderful. Tony brought my son through for me today.
He loves to wear really horrible t-shirts, like either brightly coloured t-shirts or with logos or jokes on t-shirts. You see that? Do you remember that from me?
He used to wear bizarre t-shirts, even Bart Simpson type things, you know, everything had a slogan or was saying on it.
You would have gone to see him 3 times after he passed. Do you see that? So it's like you went 3 times significantly to a chapel of rest or something like this.
Yeah, actually in 2 different chapel of rests, because he died like 100 miles away from where I live, so the first chapel of rest was there, and then twice when we brought him home to bury him, twice I visited that chapel of rest.
You disliked his friends, or you hated his friends, really? Do you see that?
A lot of his friends, a lot of them jack the lads, a lot of them in trouble, and at times, you know, I think he just skimmed it himself. So there was a lot of his friends that I didn't like, so that was dead right on that one.
I know if I only had my time again, I would have taken more of your advice, you see that, and wouldn't have got involved in that same way. You should also understand how the name of Mark is important here to me too. Do you see that?
When Tony mentioned Mark, it was quite significant because his brother-in-law's name was Mark, and all the others in the family were women, and so he only had Mark. You know, it was his wife's brother, so it was the only male that he interacted with on her family.
You have a photograph of him. It's in a frame, but he stands in a doorway, so you can still see the outline of the 2 sides of a doorway. I feel also I want to put my hands like that at the doorway and poke my head in a room like
That's
this.
exactly what he was doing, yeah. The photograph that Tony mentioned, I don't like very much, but my son obviously did, and he's leaning in the doorway, as Tony mentioned.
and I think I can still put my hands on that photograph. I used to have it in a frame, but I swapped it for a different photo.
Last night you lit a candle for your son in a prayer.
Yes, I did light a candle for my son last night, as Tony mentioned. It's uplifting. I have had my son come through other mediums before, but it's emotional but happiness, if you understand what I mean. You just feel like you're still connected to them, so it's a lovely feeling.
Well, first of all, it was my ex-husband's uncle, whose name's Walter, and I didn't want to speak up because he's an ex-husband, you see. But when he was talking about the description of him, tall, grey hair.
I'm going into his kitchen, I don't know what I'm doing, and I've got a blue kitchen. It's a tiny little kitchen that I've got there, and it smells a bit like spam. So there's like a spammy... I can't remember what spam smells like, but there's a spamminess.
It sounds awful, but Uncle Wal, there was a smell in the house, like a cheesy smell that he was talking about, and I didn't want to say because you know.
Do you know here that I become a bit of a hoarder with this man as well? Or I hoard newspapers and magazines at the side of me there, like I don't know why I've got them really. But I know that maybe he struggled a little bit to keep the home as maybe she had once kept that home. You see this?
How he kept the house just as it was, you know, with papers all over the place. The bedroom was left as it was. And then I'm glad to say that my grandmother came in, and she was just how I imagined her.
And it's funny really, because poor old Walter's been used as a pawn, I think. She's thrown him in to catch my attention, then got him out of the way. Would you know if your grandmother was a bit spooky, or you had a grandmother that would read tea leaves? As Wally's got out of the way, she's barged in, and all she shows me there is her, literally is a teacup and a saucer with the leaves at the bottom, and she's saying to me, I'll tell you a fortune, you know, I'll give you a go.
She used to do the tea leaves, and I do the tea leaves, and you know, it's just lovely.
I know that your grandmother gives me a ruby ring, or ruby stones in a ring.
And about the ruby rings as well. My mother left me a ruby ring. Well, I'm in a psychic circle, you see, and I do the crystal ball and the tea leaves, and they were talking about it. They were saying, oh, I had been doing the tea leaves some time ago, and it just happened to be mentioned tonight.